else feel like their hair is on fire lately? It's okay. We all just lived through September. And a lot of people are feeling the heat of a lot of different things happening. So for all of us, obviously it's September, obviously a lot of transition, a lot of budgets being cut, a lot of work being increased, tuition's rising, state support's falling. For our students, they are feeling it too. They have been under a lot of pressure before they got here, trying to figure out how to look just awesome enough to get into Michigan, doing the activities, getting through the tests, all of that. For the parents, they have poured their lives into their students. This is the biggest investment of their lives, financially, temporally, spiritually. This is huge. And so all of us at the starting line, we're all getting to move in, already feeling brittle. We're all getting there already feeling a bit on edge. And in the midst of this, the climate in which we do our work is shifting. And we're not just talking about the presence of a new president, although that creates a new set of challenges for us as we understand the vision and direction in which he wishes to take the university. But we're talking about all the external factors outside the university as well. So most of you would think that you're experts on millennials, and you would probably be right. Although it's interesting, on NPR this week, they're starting to do a series on millennials, and some millennials don't know of the label millennial applying to themselves. No generation actually names itself. I mean, I'm not sure my generation would voluntarily step forward and said, we'd like to be Generation X, thank you. But all of us have some expertise at working with millennials in some way. And we think, okay, we're set, we know about these students, and we are awesome. And we know about this 4-generation cycle, that most of the millennials' parents were boomers, most of Generation X's parents are the silent generation. But we start to see something different. Notice the ages. Time's passing. And it's time for a new generation to arrive. In 2017, we'll start seeing the global generation arrive. And their parents will be Generation X. And that may not mean much to you yet unless you are a parent who is Generation X, in which case you have probably quite a lot to say and could take another hour up here to say it, if you were limited in time. But knowing about a 4-generation cycle isn't enough. I mean, we've talked about the parenting part of the generation cycle, about how a lot of the parenting comes from a notion of, I will never do what my parents did. And so you do the reverse, and your kids in turn say, I will never do what my parents did. And they did what your parents did. You got served. But something else propels this 4-generation cycle. And it's a cycle of what's going on in society. A cycle of crisis to building to awakening to unraveling. And understanding that this propels itself is pretty interesting. So what does it mean? Putting it in terms of how our global generation will see it, they have grown up in a time of crisis. And by crisis, we're not just meaning like a little 6-month or 1-year crisis. We're meaning like 9/11 to the financial crisis to all of what's going on in the Middle East. It's a decade to 15-year major world-wide crisis we talk about when we talk about crisis in this setting. And that's been their childhood. They come to the university about the point that we're starting the building process, where we're rebuilding infrastructure, how we act as a community, certainly the roads. All of us who live near Ann Arbor Saline have felt that very acutely. How corporation works, how government works, building the structures that we share together. As they get into middle years, that'll start to be the more creative time. We're feeling a little bit of relief that we've built the structure. We're feeling a little bit of relief that we've got something supporting us. And now we can start to really interact with culture. And then in elder adulthood, starting the individualization, turning away from society a little bit, starting to focus on, what about me? What about me? Now, the Generation X, most of their parents, had their childhood in an awakening phase, their young adulthood as things were unraveling, middle years during crisis, so the major earning years during an economic downturn, and in elder years, the building and infrastructure phase. You can imagine how that affects a person differently if they take in the cycle in that order. That there is zero trust in institutions. Those are the parents coming to see us. Aren't you excited? So, because those are the parents who are coming to see us, we see a lot of things that are going to ramp up. We've seen risk aversion. That's going to heighten. Again, this is a very invested in generation on the part of their parents that we're seeing arrive. So it's not that these parents want to have their kids swaddled in bubble wrap forever, but they are scared about making sure that their kids have a great life based on the lives that they've had. That they don't want their kids to suffer what they feel they've suffered themselves. And they're not playing about that. Any of you who work with parents at any level know they are not playing about that. They also are very into individualization. Again, their parents grew up in a time that community was coming apart. So that's what they know. Now, these studies were done either on our students or by our own staff. So, for example, the work on cell phones and tablets in elementary schools, that study was done by John Taylor and his team, as they're thinking about the future of bookstore. When we're thinking about the future of what's going on in our own student life facilities, we're looking at elementary school. We're looking at how these students are coming forward to us, to think about how we can best deliver what they need, and how they will actually want what we have to deliver. As well, when we talk to them, we may have a different language in terms of what the worldview is. So they may have a sense that they are liberal, more liberal than us, but what liberal means to our students is different than what liberal means to us. It doesn't mean you're liberal anymore to say you support same-sex marriage. It just means you breathe. For our students, both conservative and liberal students believe in same-sex marriage. They support it. However, we see a lower support for choice. We see a greater idea that women should, if they're raising children, should perhaps be in the home to do that. There's some shifting feelings about how family comes together, but a strong support on the concept of family, however it looks. And so when we're talking with somebody and talking about liberal versus conservative, that means different things to older and younger, and that's important for us to flag. So I've mentioned this whole idea of investment, and for parents, this is a conservative investment strategy. This might be the area of their lives that they feel most hopeful in terms of how they've invested. Certainly isn't their retirement funds. It certainly isn't their mortgages. Those have been all over the place. Their kids are their best hope. And they don't say this cynically. I don't think anybody's saying, that this is where I need my money. I think they're meaning for their kids to have the best possible life ever. And like any parent, they want to pour in what they know from their own life experiences to make that happen. And that's what we're going to receive from them. We're raising that village at the same time. So the important thing for us is that the parents have been involved in all of this. For student life work, so much of our work is about student authorship. This is going to be a moment of tension for us, and we need to figure out that tension. And we need to figure out how to measure how that works. And that might mean measuring our impact on parents as well. That might mean that part of our developmental work is developing the parents. That could be exciting work. Yeah, some of you are saying, exciting. So this is where we are. Now, the awesome thing about this is that the building phase of of society is the very thing that student life does well. This is where we are Awesome. This is where we shine. So you think about this, and Royce often mentions a story and a very tragic one about friends of hers who talked about not just raising a child, but how do we raise a neighborhood? How do we raise the whole arena in which my child grows? I was mentioning that to a friend of mine, and my friend challenged me saying, well, a student already comes to college with a neighborhood. We don't need a new neighborhood for the kid. The kid comes from parents, the kid comes from all the high school friends. And it kind of clicked for me that we're no longer raising a neighborhood. We're raising two. We're raising the neighborhood here, and we're creating a neighborhood here. But we're also raising the neighborhood from which the student came. We're raising parents. We're raising other colleges students and other people who aren't in college. We're raising all of them. Our work has grown, and our influence has grown. And student life does this very well. Now, think about this. Think about what building means for our work. It means that everybody who is engaged in civic education, suddenly this is holiday time, because this is when they're building infrastructure. This is when they're building new societal structures. When we're thinking about wellness and leadership and how all of that comes together, our students are very invested in that because they know that those are important building blocks for where they're going to go next. Our students are very clear that they need to understand, and they get very clear in short order here, but they need to understand situations different from themselves. So inclusive excellence becomes all of our work. It is infused in every single bit of the work we do. All of it. All of this involves integrative learning. All of this involves putting the pieces together. Because at this point, for example, an in-portfolio works. We're no longer talking about little bits of data. The student can have little bits of data, but the student is putting together the full life narrative in that moment and creating the meaning and understanding how to convey that to others. That's been the work of in-portfolio and the work more broadly of integrative learning. And that work is pretty exciting. You saw Praveen up here just practically shimmering, talking about that. That is the transformational work that does for our students. And they suddenly get it, and they suddenly know how to convey it to an audience of people that should scare them, and to an audience of others that are ready to receive them. So I wanted to be subtle in this message, and so I just went right there. The awesome thing about the learning outcomes you heard about a few moments ago is that they speak to global generation needs. They speak to these needs of becoming a relational learner, of understanding of differences. We're creating that health and wellness piece to go with it. But all of these learning outcomes are about the work that we do in student life and about the work that we do on behalf of the global generation. So we've got exciting work ahead, and that's been developed in large part because of the work all of you have done to listen to these students, to include students in understanding how we ask the questions both in surveys and in the day-to-day conversations. So we're bringing the nerdery to all of you, and many of you have already worked with me on pieces of this, and I thank you. Those of you who haven't will. And so if I'm not on your calendar, make sure that happens, because this is some exciting work ahead. The collective impact leads are going to be working with you on various portions of this. I'm working with you. Amy's working with you on the integrated learning components. We've got a lot of great work ahead because we want to be able to tell the story of our students' lives. But more to the point, we want to enjoy the fact that we have this special role in their lives. I wanted to tie back by using a slide that Eric would be very embarrassed I'm using, because for the latter years of his life, he was focused on helping people be better presenters and be more visual in their presentation. But his work was about creating the ribbon across all the experiences that students have, and understanding that it's one large college experience, not a collection of classes, not a GPA, not a bunch of individual units. It's a University of Michigan experience. The work we do in student life creates the leadership for this university on this work. And that's the exciting part of what's ahead for us. I share this with all of you because you've been through the first crazy weeks of school. They bring excitement and the possibility of a new year, a new life, or new lives that we're affecting. We get to measure that. We get to tell the story. And that's going to be extremely exciting. So I want to thank you for listening to this and for sharing in the work that we have ahead. So thanks so much.